Hello and welcome to the Joe's Knows NFL Draft, the inaugural episode or episode one. Last year we did a couple episodes, but this year we're going to give you all the positional rankings, 1 to 6 for each position. We're also going to give you a live draft show on April 25th, the draft day. We're also going to give you some mock draft episodes, maybe some different ones along the way. Today, here, and for most of the episodes, we're going to have Will Kukowski, Matt Freeman, and me, Jack Kemler. Today, we're going to start off with the best episode we can, and that's doing the quarterbacks. This quarterback class, at least the top 6, is very, very loaded. We're going to start with Will, going with his guy, number 6, Michael Penix.
Yeah, and Jack, a big Michael Penix fan. And the big story about him is how NFL ready he is. As a 24-year-old, he's been in college football for a while. He's had 5 seasons under his belt, not all healthy. He struggled with injury heavily at Indiana, cutting down his seasons in half both times, and then transferring over to Washington, where he played and was relatively healthy throughout his entire years as a Husky. The big story about the lefty is he absolutely slings the ball across the field. A great deep ball, one that I would say is probably the best in the class. Either his, Caleb Williams, or Jaden Daniels. It's a really tough argument. All of them throw it very well. His ability to hit open passes, to just make deep throws, to make the correct throws is honestly one of the top levels of his entire class. He's been able to do stuff that some quarterbacks cannot. He puts balls in places that are really impressive, but the setbacks are where we really get into why he's at number 6. He's got a long arm. The very long throwing motion makes it a little bit easier for defenses to catch up on some of those comeback routes and even just getting sacked. The ball's in a bad place for a little bit too long. It also just messes with his overall throwing mechanics. And his footwork really hasn't been great throughout the years in evading the pocket, scrambling around. He's not the strongest. He's not the most fast. He tore his ACL, I believe, just once in college. And it really, that along with other knee injuries, leg injuries he suffered, it has cut down his mobility completely. He still shows the ability in some plays to step out and make things happen on the run. But for him, the story just is how he could be throwing the ball at a high level right into the NFL. And he fits in on some of the teams. I would probably say he's going to be more of a second rounder. Some people have him as a late first rounder. But to me, generally, there's not many teams in that late end of the round that are going to be taking a quarterback. So I have Penix going somewhere in the earlier parts of the second round. Maybe the Patriots just skip on a quarterback completely and try to get him on the comeback. They take Marvin Harrison. That's one possibility. And a player comparison I have for him, it's really tough. There's not many guys who are like him. So, I probably would have to take a guy like Justin Herbert, but from the left side, a guy who can make a lot of throws. It's a little bit of a weak comparison because he's a more buttoned up prospect, especially coming into the draft out of Oregon. He was a little bit more solid. But the original take comes from his ability to whip the ball on all levels and really just get the job done from inside of the pocket.
All right, moving on to the next quarterback. At number 5, we're going to have Bo Nix. To get into my strengths for Bo Nix, I think he protected the ball the best in college last year. Had 1% turnover-worthy plays. That was number 1 in all of college football. Had a 45-3 touchdown interception ratio his last year in college, which is honestly insanity. So I think he protects the ball the best in college. He improved every year as pocket presence wise, dating back since Auburn. Every 2-minute drill he has been presented with in college, he shows up. He has shown to be very, very, very clutch in his college career, which has been a long one. He's great when the play breaks off schedule. He is one of the better quarterbacks in this draft. He can evade pass rush while keeping his eyes downfield. Tricks the secondaries, actually. The secondary sometimes with his eyes. He does do that very well. He has been shown to show zip on the ball in any window he can. He definitely has the arm strength he can use and to throw it through any window. He has used different arm angles to get the ball out better, kind of like a baseball player. And he's very comfortable in the pocket when the pocket breaks down, and never doesn't know what to do in the pocket. So moving into my weaknesses, I think his age is always the first thing that's going to come up. He's 24 years old, and that's a huge problem. And it really took him about 5 years to become this decorated NFL prospect. His footwork is very suspect at times, especially under pressure. Sometimes it kind of looks like the top of his body isn't connected to the legs. It's very weird to say, but it's just his footwork is off sometimes. He departs clean pockets a little too much, especially in his Oregon days. The Oregon's offense the past few years has just been very, very screen heavy under Dan Lanning. That kind of inflated his stats. He favors his first read way too heavily. He will rush by the play by throwing to the first read, and it won't turn into a positive play. And the deep ball can be a dime, or it's not even near a receiver, so he's very inconsistent on that. And just looking at him overall, he really is just an inconsistent player. The more you watch him, he'll do things amazingly, and then the next play he won't make a pass. For my projection, I had him starting as a mid first rounder, but the more and more I watch him, I've brought him back for early second rounder. And for my NFL comparison for Bo Nix, I got him as Derek Carr, kind of like that inconsistent player. As I was saying, I see a lot of similarities between both of those QBs. Moving on for Matt's first quarterback, we're going to go number 4 from Michigan, J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah, J.J. McCarthy is, I mean, you see the Ohio State flag behind me. I really think he's an incredibly underrated prospect in this draft. I mean, just to rattle off some of the strengths, he's a prototypical quarterback build, and I think that trait gets highly valued in the NFL especially by NFL GMs. Like we saw Will Levis, he was taken in the second round where his talents didn't necessarily put him there. It was his stereotypical build and arm strength, and you see that a little bit in J.J. McCarthy as well. You can see the arm strength, the arm talent. He's just a proven winner. He's a great leader. I mean, obviously has lost one game at Michigan, and he played under Coach Harbaugh's scheme for his entire college career, which is a very professional scheme. He's used to the pro-style offense. It won't be that much of an adjustment for him as he gets into the next level. And my weaknesses for J.J. McCarthy are unfortunately things that you can't necessarily judge. It's seen as a little bit unfair, but the fact that he's playing behind one of the best offensive lines we've seen in recent history in college football. He has 2 absolutely dynamic running backs in Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, and his receiving group has been very solid. If you look at Loveland, if you look at Wilson, and obviously playing under Harbaugh's scheme does help. So we've seen him in virtually a perfect situation throughout his entire college career, which puts a bit of a hindrance on him because when he gets drafted, he's going to face a lot more adversity in the NFL, and we have not seen him face adversity to such a large scale like he will see in the NFL. And on the flip side, I don't see how he has that incredible X factor. He doesn't possess an incredible great trait. Like he doesn't have the arm talent of a May or a Caleb Williams. So I don't see him as being a blue chip prospect, but he checks all of the boxes for a stereotypical NFL quarterback. He has the build, he has the arm strength, and I see him as being a mid to late first round guy. I think that's where he deserves to go. He's a great quarterback to continue a franchise in the right direction. You look at the Seattle Seahawks, you look at the Denver Broncos, slightly rebuilding teams looking to make a run in the next few years. So I think those would be great landing spots for him at the mid to back end of the first round. And my player comp it's a little bit unconventional, but I'm going to go Alex Smith when he entered the draft. I think that he's a very heady player. His arm talent speaks volumes, but it's not necessarily, jaw-dropping. And I just think he checks most of the boxes like an NFL quarterback should.
Yeah, Matt, do you think that J.J. McCarthy, because of how good his mental game is, but his physical game and his talent kind of isn't there, you think that his ceiling is kind of lowered by that?
I would say yes and no because, I mean, theoretically, as you're analyzing him as a prospect, as you're analyzing these other quarterback prospects, the raw talent isn't on the same level as, Caleb Williams, like Jaden Daniels, like Drake May, guys who are seen to go in the top 5, top 10 of this draft. But, I mean, we look at guys like Tom Brady, like Drew Brees. These weren't physical specimens coming out of college. These weren't physical specimens in the NFL. But I think that his decision-making and his mental game, who knows how far it can take him. So for me to sit here and say that, he has a limited ceiling while we look at some of the all-time greats, not necessarily being as talented as other quarterbacks, but they're still deemed some of the best quarterbacks in NFL history. I think it's unfair to put a ceiling on a guy because of physical limitations. So I see your point, and I can see the point of anyone. I can see the side of anyone saying that there is a bit of a ceiling on him, but I think that if you have the right quarterback, you put him in the right system with the right guys around him, then there isn't necessarily a ceiling. You look at Brock Purdy, the sky's the limit if he gets put into the right situation.
All right, moving on to for Will, the number 3 player, the 2023 Heisman winner, Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, and Jack, I don't know if you remember, but I mean, when I was watching this guy's film, I was trying to convince Jack that this was the number 1 quarterback in the draft. I mean, just watching him play was so electrifying this year at LSU. Him and Malik Neighbors put together a really special season. Don't forget about Brian Thomas, too. He also was a huge piece in the receiving game. But just to get to the strengths that are what makes him such a special talent, the running game pops right off the screen. I mean, he has put up historic numbers this year. His legs are – he runs funny, but he gets places fast. And that's – I mean, he does it better than any other quarterback in this draft. And it fits in with his decision-making. His QB IQ by itself isn't amazing. It took him 4 years. He really wasn't good at Arizona State before transferring. The big negatives that stick out are those. The processing isn't there. He's not at an elite level for a quarterback in the thinking and the processing realm, but the physical attributes just stick out. He only turned the ball over, I think 2 or 3 times. He was in the fourth best turnover-worthy play percentage in the entire college football. That's an elite stat going into it. And the numbers he put up as a Heisman winner were absurd. At LSU, matching only Joe Burrow, the last quarterback to put up numbers like him, the last LSU quarterback as well. And it just goes to show how talented this guy is and how much he can get down on the football field. But you turn over to the negatives where it's a really big problem. The guy's 24. He's not as young as the other prospects. He is coming in still a little bit of a project. He's a little bit undersized at 6'4", a good quarterback throwing size, but coming in at 210, he's a little bit weaker. And that's where my biggest negative for him comes in. He gets sacked at one of the highest pressure to sack rates. Whenever guys are blitzing and get their hands on him, he goes down instantly. And that's a huge, huge problem. It takes away almost every positive because in the NFL, if you get sacked, you're a mess. I mean, we turn over and we look at the New York Giants season, the past few seasons, their O-line tears it up and has a horrible season. They just blew up some of the most sacks, and no one can get it done. Tommy DeVito was their only savior, and that was a Linsanity run for a bit. So if you have a guy who's just going to be getting pulled down on the ground, especially if we're talking about a top 2 pick going to a team like the Bears or the Commanders who don't have a set offensive line to be anchoring down, he's going to have to get a lot done. And yes, he possesses the ability of the RPO game that he runs so well, and they ran so well at LSU. And that is such a big plus in this modern day offense for coaches. But if you're being dragged down on the ground at like 4 or 5 times a game, the negative plays start to add up. And the new trend in football is to take away those sacks. Those teams that you're seeing make pushes into the Super Bowl and deeper into the playoffs, they all have, good O-line with, a good quarterback that could keep the ball moving downfield. And this is something that Jayden Daniels really, really struggled with throughout his college, and I don't see it changing going into the NFL.
Yeah, well, you talked about how Jayden Daniels was weak. Do you think that you saw somebody like Lamar Jackson back in 2018 got drafted later because of his injury history? Jayden Daniels has an injury history, but do you think with his very slender frame and how he runs the ball, very risky, do you think he has an injury waiting for him and that you would kind of be cautious drafting him?
I actually would agree. He does run very funny. I don't know how to explain it. He runs very straight up, and we all know it. I mean, it's all over X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. Look up Jayden Daniels taking a big hit. I mean, there's a whole highlight reel of him just getting smoked. He's not a smart runner. I mean, he's an incredible track runner, and he does some crazy things with his feet. I mean, he's just so explosive in the open field, and it is so relative to my comparison. I mean, there's no one else you can compare him to but Lamar Jackson, and he plays just like he did at Louisville, as you said. And to me, I mean, no injury history that's scaring me, but I really think it's that tendency to lose track of where he is in the pocket, and he's really not evading defenders well. His tendency just to lose it and on those big plays going backwards. I think that's really going to scare off NFL GMs. I think he was. I mean, originally I was thinking he was going to be a top 3 pick, and then I was thinking maybe top 10. But I mean, I see this guy going later, maybe in the 15 to 20 realm. There's a lot of teams that are like the Colts. They're going to get a cornerback, and the Vikings probably aren't going to draft him, but there's a chance that a team like the Vikings pick him up at 14. It's probably a better fit for him on the Vikings. But in that realm, I don't think he's going to be a top-notch quarterback. His age also scares me. He still is a little bit of a project. I mean, Lamar Jackson is still. I mean, we talked about it in our NFL show this year. Lamar Jackson is still getting better as a quarterback, and this year was one of his best seasons because he finally became a passer. It's going to take Jayden Daniels till he's 29, 30 to be the most elite he can be. And at that point, it's not the best buy now situation. If you're getting a quarterback and you want to spend a big draft pick on him, it's going to be either Caleb Williams or Drake May. I wouldn't go and try to build a franchise around this guy. It's a mess that's waiting to happen.
Yeah, and Will, I got one more question for you. The reality of his receivers in college were, I mean, if you look at Malik Nabers, you look at Brian Thomas Jr., those are some of the best receivers in the country. So, especially in this upcoming draft. So, would you say that would scare you a little bit as well, the fact that he has been throwing to these top-notch receivers for this past year?
Yeah, Freed, as you said with the J.J. McCarthy thing, the offense that Jayden Daniels got to play under this year, under Brian Kelly, was so good. It was as pro-ready as you can see. Watching the film, he didn't do much special. It was just move the ball downfield, keep on moving the sticks. He has elite footwork, as I mentioned. His 3-step drop is one of the best I've seen in this entire class, and that's what really got me excited. I'm like, this guy connects his body, connects his feet very well. His mechanics are great. It's sound. He hits the middle of the field very well. But you take a step back and you realize that his offense was just taking things to the house. I mean, Malik Nabers had 10 yards of separation. If Marvin Harrison wasn't in this draft, there's without a doubt that Malik Nabers is the wide receiver 1. He might even be in a top 5 pick. And he still may be this year. He was such an elite receiver for Jayden Daniels. The offense was catered to him. He didn't do much. He just got back in his drop and he hit the guy crossing over the middle. It was usually relatively open. He did, hit the out route. He did read those quick plays at an elite level. I mean, he made those quick on-field reads, and he did it very well. And that was what made LSU excel so far, throughout their offense. They were just so elite, and that was because of the quick little dump-offs he was able to make. It was all catered to him, though, and I can't fall in love with Jayden Daniels as an NFL quarterback. The weaknesses just shine way too strong. And as you said with J.J. McCarthy, that offense was so good.
All right, moving on to our number 2 quarterback. For me, we're going to do North Carolina, Drake May. To start with Drake May, I think he has the best size and arm talent inside of this draft, in my opinion. Arm talent could definitely be debatable, but not the size. 6'4", 225. He's definitely the best in this draft. I think he's extremely comfortable in the pocket. He doesn't look flustered at all. He looks like a very competent quarterback in the pocket. He works through his progressions like a pro as well. The mobility is there, although he didn't really utilize it much in college. He definitely still did it, but not as much as you would like. He definitely has the ability to turn into a threat as a runner. He also has the ability to break the pocket and make a play when needed. He demonstrates great skills when performing off-platform and under the pressure throws. His accuracy at all 3 levels, short, intermediate, deep, I think he's amazing there. And he is very cautious and recognizes post-snap safety rotations, something that not a lot of college quarterbacks can do. But for his weaknesses, I think his release speed is kind of a problem. It's below average with something with his arm and his size, something that needs to be worked on. He had a 61 on target rate this past season. That was the worst in this whole QB class of 2024. So that is definitely probably my biggest weakness of him was that on target rate. He does throw way too many balls into closing windows. He overestimates if he can make throws too much, and most of his interceptions, which aren't that many, but most of the interceptions he has in college came from throwing those balls in tight windows or overestimating throws. The blitz recognition also needs to be sharpened up. When you watch his play, half of his sacks, he is very surprised when the defender comes on him. And then he misses the easy throw from time to time a little too much. And it's not like the deep throw. It is the intermediate. It is the short throw. From time to time, he misses it. But that's a very short list of weaknesses. And I did a kind of a medium list of strengths. I can go on and on about him. He was amazing at UNC. So my projection for him, I think he should be a top 3 pick. If he gets outside of that, you're getting a steal in Drake May. And NFL comparison, I think everybody has said Justin Herbert. I'm going to kind of steer away from that, even though I probably do agree. I'm going to say Jordan Love just for the fact of how comfortable he does look in the pocket and how he definitely is mobile but doesn't use his mobility as a threat. Also his accuracy and his mental game. That's why I have him with Jordan Love.
Yeah, Jack. So is there a specific situation that you think Drake May would thrive in that top 3, top 5 range? Or do you think that he's a plug and play guy at pretty much every NFL franchise?
With the top picks, I would say the best place he could go is probably the Commanders. Bringing in Cliff Kingsbury would be a huge ad for him because Kingsbury was amazing in college last year as a coach. I think that's the best situation for him to go with my projection as a top 3. But if he goes anywhere else, I think he is a plug and play guy just for all the talent he has and his mental game is there. It's just definitely a lot of stuff in his game he needs to sharpen up. But there's no things in his game where it's like, wow, this needs to be taught very badly by coaches. So I think he's definitely a plug and play guy, but Commander's best situation. All right, then we're going to move on to our last quarterback here, our first quarterback. I think mostly everybody's the unanimous 2022 Heisman winner, Caleb Williams from USC.
Yeah, and Caleb is a really interesting guy to break down on film. If we start with the strengths, I mean, the arm talent is Patrick Mahomes-esque. It's some of the best arm talent that I've ever seen, at a college level. It's absolutely unreal. I mean, his improvisation skills remind me of a Kyler Murray, of a Patrick Mahomes. I mean, this guy, the ceiling is out of this world. The uncoachable things are out of this world. It's really, bar none, the highest ceiling that I've ever seen coming from a quarterback prospect out of college. But when you move over to the weaknesses, that is where it gets a little bit dicey. He plays a lot of hero ball. There's been plenty of times throughout his entire college career where he has open checkdowns, even open intermediate routes, yet he will gamble and take the deep shot, and that will not fly in the NFL. And also, this is very under the radar, but a guy coming into an NFL team, he's the quarterback. He essentially has the keys to the franchise. For him to be as much of a headache as it seems like he is in the locker room, you're talking about a guy who is more cocky than anyone I've seen entering a draft ever. He's made $20+ million last year in college endorsements alone. So you're talking about a guy who already has pro money. He already has the cocky attitude, and he's just a spry 21-year-old prospect who's getting the keys to the franchise, and he's already walking around with this type of attitude. He's supposed to be a leader of men, a leader of his team, and just for me, I don't see how a guy like that can slide right into a locker room and lead a team. So it might seem a little bit cliche, but if you can't lead your football team as a quarterback, especially as a brand new franchise quarterback, then I don't necessarily think that that's ever going to work in the NFL. He needs to change his mental framework in terms of the off the field stuff. But if we talk strictly on the on the field stuff, Caleb Williams is the highest ceiling prospect I have ever seen while covering the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's enough said, but he's going to be walking in. Well, most likely he's going to be walking into the Bears system if they do trade away Justin Fields. And a Bears franchise that's never had a franchise quarterback, that's always struggled with it, and they just fired their offensive coordinator. They're bringing in a new one. Do you expect him to come in there and just play great? How long do you think it's going to take for him to actually show up and be the top QB that everybody expects him to be?
Well, I actually think this Bears situation is very underrated for a quarterback, especially a young one. You look at Caleb Williams, and he obviously free agency is still in the very early stages, so we don't know if they're going to land another weapon via free agency. But they have that number 9 pick to play with, and that could be a guy like Rome Odunze, like another top-tier weapon. But the roster in and of itself has a young offensive line that's improving. That was pretty solid last year, especially for the expectations. You have DJ Moore, who just came off an absolute monster year. And then, like you said, they just kind of cleaned house on the offensive coaching side of things. So, again, I've touched on his inability to play under pressure, his tendencies of playing some hero ball. But the talent is there to take this Bears team to the playoffs in coming years, assuming he goes to Chicago. I think that there's going to be some growing pains, especially with a completely new coaching staff and obviously a new setting for Caleb. There's definitely going to be growing pains, especially from a somewhat raw quarterback prospect. But I believe that the flashes of greatness will strongly outweigh the struggles, especially early on in his career. And, Caleb's just a guy where if he's not the number 1 pick, I don't understand what's going on. We see how Patrick Mahomes can absolutely change the direction of a franchise, and that's kind of the guy that you're hoping you're going to get here. He has that incredible ceiling like Mahomes coming out of college. Again, Mahomes could have flopped, but we saw what happens when you hit on a guy like that. So I think that that's the new trendy pick, especially after seeing Anthony Richardson last year go so high because of his high ceiling. So Caleb Williams has the opportunity to be a face of the franchise type guy. I think that he should be the number 1 pick. I think he should be a Chicago Bear. And to be honest with you, my player comp is Patrick Mahomes. I'm not saying he is Patrick Mahomes. I'm just saying the improvisation skills, the arm talent are parallel, especially coming out of college.
We're going to get into just 2 kind of elephant in the rooms with this QB class. We went over the top 6 quarterbacks and how great they are. But if there's a team that's looking to draft a quarterback in the 3rd, 4th round, the talk has been, is it Michael Pratt or is it Spencer Rattler? And if you're a team, Will, who are you drafting?
Now, Jack, coming into this year, I was big on Michael Pratt from Tulane. Got a knee injury that, messed up his velocity, messed up his accuracy towards the late end of the season, knocked him out of a handful of games. So it wasn't a complete season. He couldn't build his draft profile. It wasn't the season that Michael Pratt was looking for, but it was the same thing for Spencer Rattler. The statistics for Rattler throughout his many years in college just haven't been there. He's always had this extreme talent. He's had this ability to get it done, but he never really has. This year was a lot better of a statistical season, but it took him a long time to finally come together as a quarterback. While Michael Pratt has been a little bit more of a sustainable quarterback prospect throughout his career at Tulane. Weighing in at 6'3", 217, Michael Pratt is a very sizable quarterback prospect. The rest of his combine weigh-ins were great, except his hand size were a little bit small, and that tends for the ball to wobble, so not a great part of his game. A little bit of a negative there for Michael Pratt, kind of like a Kenny Pickett problem. But the positives are there. He plays the game very clean and fundamentally. He gets out of the pocket and can make some plays on the run that surprise you for him being a Tulane quarterback. You'd say, why is this guy not playing Power 5 football? He's very solid in the pocket. He's very comfortable. He does get smoked by sometimes, and he doesn't really read plays all the time. But the overall prospect in Michael Pratt, it's just you're going to get a good, solid backup quarterback. And if he blooms in and turns into something solid, you're gonna get a good 20 through 15 quarterback that will carry a team here or there through some tough waters. If he's on a very solid team, I bet he can get some good things done. But overall, him over Rattler isn't a who's better, it's a who's worse, and I'm really not a fan of Rattler.
All right, moving on to Matt. A huge talk about three of the quarterbacks in the top six, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, and Jay Daniels, is they are 23 and older, two of those being 24. What are like the major cons or downsides to drafting these older quarterbacks this year? Even if you draft them while you have McCarthy, Williams, or May open, would you ever do that?
I really wouldn't, to be completely honest with you. The only guy that I would say is somewhat of a toss-up would be Jaden Daniels versus J.J. McCarthy. But other than that exact debate, these old quarterbacks are just – it's a head-scratching move. If you are drafting a guy in the first or second round, you are hoping to find your quarterback of the future. And when you're drafting a guy that is 23, 24 years old, and especially all three of those guys that you mentioned being incredibly raw prospects, guys that we're going to need to see how they adapt to the NFL. They're going to need to learn a new system. You look at Bo Nix, you look at Jaden Daniels, you look at Michael Penix. I don't think that their ceiling is incredibly high necessarily, and I don't think that they're super close to hitting that ceiling in the first place. I think there's a lot of work to do if you draft any of those three quarterbacks, and them being 23, 24 years old already, they might be 26, 27 by the time they actually scratch the surface of being a good to great NFL quarterback. So if you're waiting that long to get return on your investment on a first or second round pick, especially at the quarterback position, I think that you really need to be wary of your franchise's direction. And if you're in a spot to win now, like the Seahawks, who will be looking to win in the coming years with that incredible young defense, drafting an old quarterback that will take a long time to develop does not make any sense when there are plenty of guys around the NFL that have already reached their ceiling and that can step in and play smart football for you right off the rip.
Yeah, and Jack, if you don't mind, I kind of want to hop in on this. Matt, same lane here. For the cons on these older quarterbacks, I'm really not a big fan of drafting an older quarterback. To me, it just doesn't make sense. If you have a guy like Michael Penix, he's spent his 4 or 5 years in college reaching his climax of his football talent. There's really not much more you're going to squeeze out of Michael Penix. I mean, we know what he could do throwing the football. He could throw some elite balls, but I mean, you're not going to make him a stronger, faster quarterback. His injury history is right there. And, talking about that injury history, it's just a scary look. And you go over to Bo Nix, a guy that's taken, a Dan Lanning run team for him to become the guy that he was. I mean, this could have just been a product of one of the best run football organizations last year. Oregon was just a complete team. They did everything well. So Bo Nix, to me, having not really a great career and finally putting it together in Oregon is very suspect. And then the final older guy that we're talking about here, Jane Daniels, it just seems like he's at Lamar Jackson situation where it's going to take him a while to get to where he wants to get. And I mean, you're talking 30 years old. There are guys, as Freed said, Minshew just put up an incredible season with the Colts. He can go and be a quarterback for any team and lead them somewhere. So taking Jane Daniels in the first round, I really think as the draft process gets a lot closer to draft day and these NFL team mock drafts come out, you're going to start to see like Jaden Daniels going in the mid to late first round, and you're going to be very confused. But it's the truth. I mean, Michael Penix really shouldn't be a top 2 round pick. Yeah, he threw the ball. He was an incredible college quarterback, but he's just too old, and it's not there. The negatives they shine way too strong, and it just isn't a situation that these teams want to be picking up.
All right, yeah, that's it for our first episode on the quarterbacks. And Will's right. You don't know how this is going to turn out on draft day. A month ago, we had J.J. McCarthy as our number 6 quarterback, and he moves into the 4th. So everything changes over time. So right now, this is temporary, our list. But the strengths and weaknesses are not temporary. Those are what we believe in as we've watched hours of film on these guys. But stay tuned for the running back and wide receiver episodes. We're also going to have college basketball episode, MLB, NBA episodes going to be coming out soon. So a lot of shows are going to be coming your way. But thank you guys so much for watching. So for Will Kukowski, Matt Freeman, and me, Jack Hemler, have a good day.